I'm going to ask each of you first to look back a little bit about what caused excitement over the summer, or over the exploration season, whatever you want to, however you want to think about it, so that we can capture some of what that was. So Peter, obviously in the silver space, if you look back over the last 3-4 months, what pieces of news or events, discoveries, what stands out to you that the market liked, that the market got excited about? Or was there just nothing?
Honestly, there wasn't a whole lot in silver in terms of discoveries. In terms of sort of positive news, that was also pretty challenging. I'm going to say more generally, and I've heard this from a couple of people. I was not at Beaver Creek, but I've heard a few people commenting that M&A at a high level is starting to get the green light. And that's obviously not necessarily silver specific, but I found that really interesting. And I had not heard that before, to the point where management groups are getting this confirmation from directors, and so they can actually start looking around and making this happen. So that's pretty exciting, and it's a great time.
I was at Beaver Creek. I certainly heard that in conversation as well. We hear this, you're in meetings with companies that should be acquisition targets for mining companies at some point. They become aware of those kinds of mandates when they always have ongoing communication with the kinds of companies who might be interested in their asset. They're always keeping those companies up to date so that if the mandate does come down from the board to start looking for acquisitions, then the team at the mining company is already familiar with their asset. And the news is, especially in certain categories in particular, sort of the companies that are looking for, heap leachable gold projects in the United States, there's been some mandates from boards there. So we'll see. Mining companies move about as quickly as molasses in the winter, so it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it would be nice to see a little bit more of that happen. Most of the M&A action that we've seen in the mining space for a couple of years now has been mostly sort of mergers at the high level, which is great in that it puts more companies perhaps into higher valuations and therefore makes them more open to some indexes and to bigger funds and whatnot. But it doesn't unlock capital that's locked away from mining specific investors. So it would be nice to see more M&A. Chen, you can talk about anything looking back that you think caused excitement, attracted your excitement. I was going to ask you maybe to think a bit particularly about platinum and palladium, just because you look at that more than some of the rest of us. But looking back over the last 4 to 6 months, what do you think, what stands out to you as things that investors liked, that got positive attraction, or that you think sets things up well to come?
Well, that's a good question. I don't see a lot of good news. I think one of those big news in the industry is Newmont buying Newcrest, right? And now you look back, it's almost pretty obvious. Newmont see a bad quarter coming, so they go out and grab Newcrest, and then they close the deal before the quarter end, before they report a terrible quarter. So what kind of M&A is that? I don't get it. So I'm looking for creative M&A, it's something really excite the market. And so far haven't done much. As you said, platinum, palladium. Palladium is the bear market has been going down. You look at the rhodium. Rhodium is going down much, much rapidly. I didn't have a time to talk about in my talk because it was the platinum byproduct. That's the palladium, rhodium that support the platinum production. So platinum cost is higher than gold, and the platinum price is 900. So I think that's to me, it's excitement, it's a buying opportunity, and I put it this way.
John, thanks for rushing over after your filming. We're talking about, if we look back over the last 4 to 6 months, what stands out to you as things that investors actually liked? What stands out as things that caused excitement in the space? Because I started by saying it'd be easy for us to sit here and sort of moan for a while, but I wanted to see if we can talk about things that are working. So what does that bring up for you?
Like I've been pumping the lithium story since
I was going to ask you
June
about
of
lithium
last
next.
But I mean, that's the area which captures the public's imagination. The problem with the gold plays, even though like whether gold's over 2,000 or not shouldn't really matter so long as it's stable in the $1,800 to $2,000 range, you can just see the red show up on my screen of 500 stocks when gold is down, green when it goes up, and it's just the gold price has become a drag on the public perception. We need it to really go higher than $2,000 so that people get away from this gold as a ceiling that it just can't break through. I mean, you know, stocks like nickel, FPX nickel, that to me is like one of the best picks out there. And then we get this shot from left field from the First Nations declaring that, you know, we've clear-cut logged everything in our traditional territory, and now we consider it to be sacred, and we do not want a hole in the ground in our traditional territory. And then the stock goes down again. It's like you can't win these days in the junior sector.
I was trying to have a positive conversation here. We're not helping.
Well, when you go to the lithium topic.
Okay, so I was, John, going to ask you to focus in a bit on lithium. I think there's a bunch of people here who are interested in lithium. So talk about lithium. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on hard rock lithium exploration in Canada, but why don't you talk more broadly about lithium, your thoughts on it, and then about my question.
I mean, the big picture story, and I talked about in my presentation earlier, is that the lithium-ion battery is going to be what powers the electric vehicle. And if Toyota is not pulling our leg about having figured out how to make a cost-effective solid-state lithium-ion battery, we're going to not need 600% more. We're going to need 1,200% more. So where's it going to come from? Well, direct lithium extraction, that's a big story now, getting it out of these brines from the old oil fields. That could potentially wreck the lithium pegmatite story, but until we see it, one really shouldn't believe it. The car companies, they need to see where it's coming from. Pegmatite in the ground, you measure it, you know the grade, you do the purity studies, the flow sheet is relatively straightforward. This is why Albemarle puts $109 million into Patriot Battery Metals after they publish their resource estimate, and is on the verge of paying $6 billion to buy out Liontown's Kathleen Valley project, which is similar in scale to Patriot Battery Metals project. So I think pegmatites in Canada in particular, because there's so many there, they've been ignored all these decades, this is where the dumbest company can faceplant onto a world-class discovery, so long as they put some boots in the ground and look at it. With almost everything else, you need top-notch exploration people to find a copper, gold, or silver discovery, but this is like unbelievable what's facing us the next couple of years, and I think you obviously look for the better ones. For example, I'm delighted to see that a lithium company that's not part of my group was here, Targa Exploration Corp, and they're not a fly-by-night company. I mean, the land they got, Kenor land, generated before, you know, even Bob Wares from Brunswick was starting to look at all this stuff. So this is like a science-generated project they have, and they have boots on the ground right now on the Opanaka project. We could, in 3-4 weeks, have stunning news that the game is on, that they have a big outcropping pegmatite, and people got to look at these companies, check out the serious ones.
I love that when you talk about face planting onto discovery. Speaking of Targa, I mean, they have a project that's on like Spodumene Island, but nobody's ever looked there for lithium. Like, that's the kind of opportunity that there is in hard rock lithium. So I think that's interesting. Okay, in terms of, so that's a bit looking back, not a huge amount of excitement looking back. John's got a little bit of optimism looking forward on lithium, which is exciting. Chen, let's talk about gold. I know you certainly talked about this in your talk, but let's talk about it a bit more. What do you think might happen with this resurgent Chinese interest in gold? Obviously, the China premium that we're seeing is dramatic. I think we're all wondering how, oftentimes it's, you know, when gold is being bought as a risk hedge, it's being bought in the West as a risk hedge. And in the East, it's generally more often bought when it's cheap. So they're more pragmatic about it, to be honest, in the East, and a little bit more panicked about it in the West. Right now, we're seeing a bit of an inverse of that, in that, not that the West is buying it at a cheap level, it's not cheap, but the East is buying it as a risk hedge, as a bit of as a flight to safety amidst a lot of uncertainty. So talk to me about what you see happening potentially in China with gold. I know you did already, but I'm just asking you to revisit because I know there's a lot of interest in this topic.
No, it's a typical, you look at the Chinese perspective, right? The key saving is in housing market. It's going down for a few years, and there's no end in sight. And there is Chinese currency is going down almost every month, right? So, and their limit to put money to U.S. dollar, there are limit, but people usually can get around that. Even but put the U.S. dollar, they'll worry about one day U.S. dollar start to tank. So they have a few choices, right, to put their lifetime saving, right? Chinese in general have very high saving rate. So that's what they're saying. If hypothetically have 5 empty flats and apartment, they sell one and put half in gold. It's very simple. And then China has so many people, 1.3 billion. So it just take a little bit movement. So that's caused a gold rush. So I see it's the very beginning. That's actually for me right now the excitement. If you come here, I feel so down, and I saw that chart. I said, "Oh, that's my presentation." Okay, so if this continue, you just watch that week after week, because right now people bring suitcase of gold to China because there's so much, premium, and you can take a suitcase and then you sell, make money. So the massive amount of gold is going to China. If this continue for a few weeks, our gold will over 2,000. I'm pretty sure about that. It happened historically too. At least China can move $100, $200 of gold price, no problem.
And I mean, that is an exciting idea because, I said in my presentation, the way metals bull markets start is the metal price has to move first, especially when there's no interest in the space, which there basically isn't in our metal space right now. But if gold can go, if you do see gold start to go, it breaks up above 2,000, it stays there, what would you put your money in first in terms of kinds of companies? I don't mean to name a particular operator, but like what would you do in that event?
Well, if you, first, which metal? I like silver more.
Sorry.
Remember my talk is November 15th, right? November 15th, that's Silver Institute. They have a new estimate. I talked to them, work with them very closely. I'm very certain they will go up. The huge deficit will show up on November 15th. So you look at what metal you want to invest, right? Mm-hmm. So I think because if golds go up, if I'm right, gold go over 2,000, and then when come November 15th, silver will go over 30. Just like that, right? So you want to invest, there's many different ways to invest. One is you can producer, high cost producer, they barely make money, but if gold go up $100, $200, or silver go up $10, they make a lot of money. So that's one way to make. Also exploration company, I think John, Peter, when we all talk about them. Great company out there, okay, a lot of great company out there. We just need a little bit kick of gold and silver price, and all these company will run. And they have a fantastic drilling results coming out. But right now the problem, I think Bob Sin was talking about, he has a very good presentation. He's talking about people are selling, right? People are selling on good news because they need to buy money out. They rather put money into the treasury, U.S. treasury collecting 5.5% interest rate. So people use that as a liquidity event. But if the bull market, this will be the surge of the the juniors. I remember in the past bull market, just in the past few years, every year I have a 10-bagger or more, not recently. And I'm very proud of myself because we can get in and then we all make a lot of money, have very happy subscribers. This has been tough. So that's what excites me. I see this potentially coming. We just need to watch this for a few more weeks, and we'll be there. Okay.
Peter, same kind of question for you, but obviously specific to silver. Mm-hmm. If we do get, or when we do, we will eventually get a move up in silver. Right. If we were to get that soon, And we know that there are a lot of investors out there who have been exiting the space, throwing in the towel, just needing to get capital out because they want to put it in 5% yield bonds, and that's a rational decision. What would be your suggestion or your outline for how to take advantage of a move up in silver for someone maybe who isn't even invested, who has exited but understands that at some point the opportunity will be there? What would your action plan be?
So, I guess to some extent I concur with Chen. I'd be looking at some of the larger producers. You know, almost all of these names have been depressed for some time, and they're going to move. And on days when I see silver move, in fact, I think it was September 14th, it really sort of stuck out for me. If you go back and look at what happened on that day, silver. It was that silver had moved up, and then you saw the silver stocks move up like twice as much just on that single day. Obviously, the Fed's, the Fed's meeting and announcement that kind of threw a wet blanket over all of that. But I think that, yes, look for, the lower risk is going to be, and that's where the money starts to flow first, and that's typical. But then these days when we've seen, even if it was just lasted for a couple of days, I've got my list of stocks, and I can see I've got them grouped by category. So the producers are on top, the larger producers, and then the developers, and then the juniors at the bottom of the list. And I can see the greens at the top. There's almost nothing going on in the middle.
Yeah.
And even a lot of times there's not that much going on at the bottom. But from that, you can clearly see that the money's flowing into these larger producers. It's just so obvious. That whole section of producers is where you see the green. There's small, sort of daily gains, but it really stands out. And then I'd look probably at the juniors from there. And, you've got, before you were asking me, some successes this summer, and I thought about it a little bit more, and actually there are three that come to mind. Hercules has actually been performing really well. They have a project in Idaho. You've got Suma Silver that is in Tonopah, Nevada, and in New Mexico, and then you've got Dolly Varden, who's in the Golden Triangle in BC. And all of these have had really, really good results this summer. Hercules is the one that stands out, whose shares have been moving up. Suma, Dolly, more or less holding their own, more or less moving sideways, even on good results. But that just tells you that, like Chen was saying, good results are being used as a liquidity event. And yet when this turns, some of these names that have held up the best are likely also to perform the best. So when you're looking at juniors, I'd probably keep some of these names in mind.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just going to do a little bit of a look back at things that I think did work in the summer. And I mean, anybody who reads my newsletter knows that this is my stance right now, which is that, the markets, you can't expect the markets to dole out easy wins for you right now. So it's all about betting on the stocks that are going to succeed sort of on their own. And those are the kinds of examples that Peter just gave. But there were certainly some pretty exciting discovery stories in the last little while that have done very, very well. I mean, and some of them are here. Lavras is absolutely one of those. What do they call it? The $70 million hole that they hit out there because it moved their market cap up by that much. Founders Metals, another one. I think that was an interesting story because they put out a really good drill hole. Market didn't really pay attention. They put out another really good drill hole. Market paid a tiny bit of attention. It wasn't until the third really good, and by this I mean wide, high grade, near surface, and now you're starting to show some consistency in the zone because it's the third hole. By the third hole, the market was like, oh, and then suddenly the price moved. So I think that maybe suggests the hesitancy of investors to jump on board, but when a stock moves, they can really move. Founders has gained a lot. Snowline, of course, is a standout gold success story that's been building now for more than one season. That started last year. I exited early because I thought that after last year's success and this stock building so much that how could it possibly do that much better this year? And yet apparently I left 50% on the table because that's how much it is up since I exited the story. But you can't strive for perfection. You just strive for some wins, right? So those are all gold stories. And so there is appetite for gold discovery. I think that's a statement that is always true. There's always appetite for gold discovery if it's good, if it's splashy. But there's also been some excitement around base metal discoveries. Aston Bay, these drill holes that hit into what looks like sediment-hosted copper, that grabbed a lot of attention. Fireweed has done very well, and that is a base metals exploration and development story, right? So there are stocks out there that are doing really well. Now, is there a common thread in there that can be an investment thesis? I'm not sure there is, other than the discovery side of things, for sure. And discovery is the hardest bet to make and win on, because there's so many explorers out there, and it's very hard to know. But certainly buying companies that have the money to advance very good targets right now is what I'm doing to try and create gains in the near term until we get a market that will help generate more of those gains through stocks that are clearly worth more once the market goes. And that statement applies to producers. I mean, there's gold producers out there that have hundreds of millions of dollars in cash and are producing, like Eris Metals is a good one. It's got something like $400 million in cash and securities and access to capital, and it's producing 250,000 ounces of gold a year. It's got really good cash costs. It's printing money, and it's trading for a 400 million market cap. Like it does not take a discounted cash flow model to understand that that's an undervalued company if anybody was buying gold companies. And so those will move when we get a market. It's just there's the when we get a market part of that statement. So I think there's things that have worked. Those are what I'm going to continue to focus on, those being discovery stories. John, what are you, speaking of the discovery side of things, you love discovery, you love the early stage exploration. Just to put you on the spot, are there a few companies or targets out there that come to mind that you're sort of particularly excited about in the next little while, to give people some discovery excitement?
You mean in the lithium sector?
No, anywhere, any commodity. You could talk lithium if you want.
I mean, you were asking sort of earlier about, like, if gold suddenly makes a couple $100, makes it through 2,000, everybody gets excited. I don't think it moves the needle very much in terms of valuation, but perceptually, like I've had 4 types of gold companies here at the MIF in the past year. Today, Silver Range Resources, looking for high-grade gold silver discoveries. A move in gold is not going to make people pile into that one. In May, I had West Vault Mining. Now that's the Hasbrook project, mining permit in place. It's basically waiting for the bigger companies to feel the urge to acquire a shovel-ready project and put it into production. It should be at $2 a share, but because of this pessimism about gold, it sits at 90 cents to $1. So there's a stock, if I saw believable move, I would go into that right away because it would immediately reprice. But the other 2 are Solitario Resources Corp, which should have been drilling in May, but because of the incompetent U.S. Forest Service, they still haven't got the drill permit, which they applied for in February of last year. And this is the Golden Crest project, which is on the west side of the Black Hills, where Homestake and the Wharfa projects are. It could be a deeper mirror image of Homestake and the Wharf system, both basement-hosted gold and the sediment-hosted gold. And they got all this gold on surface, but they can't drill it yet. But that's a stock which I think, because it's on the threshold of discovery, a move in gold would bring people into that. And the other one is Endurance Gold, which was finally drilling deep, which is what the market wants. And then we have a forest fire shut down the Goldbridge area, so they had to spend 6 weeks of prime drilling season doing nothing because everybody had to leave the area. But there's a stock which, you know, it's down 50% from where it was at the start of the year, and it's all because of this, like, glumness about gold. So if the perception on gold were to change, that stock would reprice also, and people would start taking seriously that there is a huge orogenic gold system similar to Braylorn at depth. Gotcha.
Chen, do you have any discovery stories out there that you are particularly excited about these days?
Well, I have, one of that I mentioned in the panel yesterday, Goliath, seems to be very, very exciting. They just done a financing that's, way oversubscribed, and then Rob McEwen and Prescott that come in very big time. and they seems to have hit something really good. We don't know the results yet, but again, I have to remind you, if the market conditions still to be rough, this company drill in the north, you have to remember to bring some register in, before the winter comes. So that's always, I've seen so many times people got excited but that's the last results, right? So people become liquidation events. So you have to be careful. But that one looks really good with all the force behind it. And the excitement coming in, and there's many others. Also I focus on producer. I just visited Victoria Gold, and I talked to John. The stock he's buying from the open market. The stock is back all the way before the successful heap leach in Yukon, and then the rumor was that there's wildfire approaching. I was visiting them in the summer. There was wildfire, and I was told the wildfire is gone, so they're back to normal. So the market must be betting a brutal winter. This winter must be so cold that cannot heap leach, or they cannot do something. It's very strange, the price, and the insiders are buying. So that's another thing you can consider.
If they can heap leach at Fort Knox for 20 years, I'm pretty sure they can heap leach at the Eagle, at the Victoria Gold Mine.
People are
every
worried
winter.
about anything right now. So it's really back to, before they start pouring gold, that level.
Yeah.
So.
Chen, you made a comment earlier about you're interested in creative M&A. That brings up an idea that someone brought up to me at Beaver Creek, which is a creative M&A. The thought that there needs to be larger exploration companies in which majors have, significant equity stakes, so that there's a more concrete method by which majors can support exploration, grassroots exploration. I thought that was a pretty interesting concept. It raises all kinds of questions, and sometimes I wonder whether my questions are from being stuck in the mud. Oh, well, how is a junior supposed to advance more than one exploration project at a time? This is my sort of conventional thinking, but what's being described is a new approach. If there was some company and, 4 majors came in and each took 15%, and the rest of it traded publicly, but the majors were funding, therefore, 60% of the capital every time that it needed to raise, and they were were advancing a swath of grassroots through to resource delineation projects. Would that work? What do you think about that? Or do you have other ideas about creative M&A or new corporate structures that might work?
That's an excellent question. The problem for the exploration company, they need coming back to the market, and then in this market condition, every time you raise money, unless you have extremely good results, it's always go down. The people who put in earlier lose money, so nobody else want to put in. That's always the problem. So I see that could be a possibility. We create some corporate structure that can do some creative things for helping exploration. As I said, I watching the big success of Maya Gold and Silver, now Aya Gold and Silver. I was shareholder. Fortunately, my biggest silver position, the best one in the last decade. What they did was they got a little bit cash flow positive from their mine. Then they do the exploration. Then boom, high grade silver was discovered. So that's the end of story. It's more than tenfold from the bottom. So yeah, you need. What I just put it this way, I feel you need a good story. You need a strong backer. And you don't need that for geo. I met a lot of exploration, a very good geo out there. They worry about money. I don't want them, even including your silver ranger talk. They don't want to come here begging for money. They want just to continue explore. So I hope that one day we will have some kind of creative way, so the people who are good at exploration can continue to explore and find a big deposit for us.
Peter, I talked in my presentation about sort of a lot of us feeling a lot of pressure because this has been a long bottom, and that means that we're lacking patience, but that there's deep-pocketed investors who often have had big success in previous cycles who are very excited right now. How do you stay excited about silver when it's taking so darn long for it to happen? How do you stay engaged?
That's a good point. I think that I'm probably more patient than anybody I know, to a fault, and just just my nature, and I think that I probably by continuously looking at the fundamentals and reassessing, and if you're willing to keep doing that, and you are open to contradictory arguments, and if you reasonably go through those arguments and you still end up bullish, then you have to stay patient. You have to still stay patient. And I mean, like Chen, I mean, we had some similar thoughts about silver and about especially solar and the effects of solar. And I think that it's dramatically underappreciated by the market what solar is going to do to silver. And what I like about that is the fact that, as I say, I think that because it's industrial demand for silver, it's going to help provide a rising floor under the silver price. So, at some point, as it continues to rise, this floor is going to be sort of a set floor, a very solid floor. And then what you're going to get is investment demand coming in. And when you get these bouts of excitement, that's really what's going to drive the silver price considerably higher in spouts that should be taken advantage of. And I guess overall, that's really about it. I did want to mention, we were talking a little bit earlier about being creative. This isn't on the M&A side, but there's one company in my portfolio that I've written up who found a really creative way to raise some money. Now, I don't have specifics in terms of how much they've raised and over what period of time, but they do have a decent high-grade silver resource. And what they've done is they teamed up with a company that is in the crypto space, and they have the world's first silver-backed NFT. So they've basically put up to 5 million ounces of silver, which as that silver gets sold in NFT form, they get paid for. So that's something I've not seen anybody do yet, and it's not dilutive.
Yeah.
It's not dilutive share-wise. There's no interest on a bond, for example, and so they've managed to be quite creative.
It's taking creative thinking these days. I know one example also is royalty companies. 10 years ago or 8 years ago, they could almost write whatever deal they wanted because royalty was the new form of money, and they came in and offered money, and companies were like, yay, money, this is going to make all the projects work. And then guess what? As those projects progressed and it seemed that the royalties were a bit heavier on the a heavier burden than expected, that all shifted, and then royalty companies became the pariah, and now they're finding a middle ground. They have to creatively come up with ways of being the middle ground. So that's amending the royalty terms. That's also becoming the providers of other sources of financing, so bringing the equity portion, bringing a nice version of the debt portion. Just another example of needing to move with the times. Last question, John, I'm going to ask you, since sentiment is a thing here today, you've been writing your letter and analyzing juniors for a long time. Where would you put sentiment today relative to sort of your history in this space? Like, is it as bad as it's ever been? Is it, actually not that terrible? Just what comments do you have from the lens of your experience about sentiment today?
I think the junior resource sector ecosystem is dying. I mean, we're being forced to retreat from Latin America, from Africa, because of resource nationalism. Even in Canada, we've got this so-called mineral title system, which is subordinated to the reconciliation requirements of the First Nations, which claim 400% of the second largest country in the world. So getting these deals done with multiple parties with overlapping claims is becoming a huge handicap for even juniors that have retreated to Canada. This threat by Powell to have elevated interest rates at least into 2026, that kills the boomer audience because they're going to put their money into 5-6% risk-free term deposits rather than gamble it on stocks. And the younger people, they don't have the patience for placing a bet, waiting for results and see what the outcome is. They're just momentum chasers, and the junior resource game just doesn't lend itself well to momentum type game. Maybe this lithium mania I've been talking about could achieve this sort of frenzied thing where stocks are going up because others are going up and discoveries are being made. And again, the important thing about the lithium space is we need 60 to 120 PMET type discoveries to be put in production by the 2030s. So it's not like rare earths where everybody stabs each other in the back because we only need 1 or 2 rare earth deposits to go into production. But I don't know what's the young people, if I think the lithium is the gateway for them to discover this sector, to learn how to think about it. We need that money coming in, and right now they have no reason to come in, and there's this attitude out there that mining is bad and anybody associated with the mining industry is bad, that they don't understand that the cell phone that they're using on the social media, whatever, has all these materials that come from different places. They don't understand that a lot of stuff comes from like one reason that it's difficult for the resource juniors, metal prices are weak because the lowest cost jurisdictions are the ones that are authoritarian governments. They don't care about the downstream victims, so all the materials are dirty. And when these young people protest mining in Canada, where it's got lots of rules that are actually enforced, it's like there's a disconnect there in comprehension. All these things, the First Nations as a threat to disrupt any Canadian exploration project, that needs to be eliminated. The young people need to get away from this idea that we need to be pure, there needs to be no mining in Canada. And of course, an example of how you can make money as a productive part of the future, like putting lithium supply into place so that, when I'm 6 feet under, it's not going to be a problem for me, but for my children and grandchildren to be part of securing their future. That needs to be, their imagination needs to get this idea. That's what I think's needed to turn around this current situation.
Fair enough, yeah.